All right, this next story. This is a longer article from the New York Times. Kennedy's lawyer has asked the FDA to revoke approval of the polio vaccine, but this is a longer article about his lawyer, Aaron Siri, and sort of their exploits throughout the years. And what struck me about this article, because they're talking a lot about, the things that they're going to be doing if RFK is put in as the head of Health and Human Services, then he's going to have somebody as his right hand, and they're suspecting this person will be his right hand, this lawyer. And this lawyer has been suing and depositioning vaccine scientists for years on behalf of other people, saying that vaccines are dangerous. And this is it's like a legal disinformation campaign that he's been running for years and years and years and years to try to sort of chill people on the spread and trying to keep vaccines around and to try to research new vaccines. It's just chilling all those things.
Yeah, no, this is definitely the New York Times sounding the klaxons, right? They saw that survey we were talking about earlier, and they're like, hey, when people find out what this guy believes in, they don't support him as much. Yeah. Let's make sure people find out what he believes in. And it's fucking scary, man. Yeah, this guy's serious. So he doesn't just depose these vaccine scientists, he deposes them with these like ridiculous 8-9 hour long depositions where he just grills them. And his goal in doing so, right, because he's never going to prove anything that he's trying to prove, because what he's trying to prove is bullshit. His goal is to create like snippets that he can pull out of context and make it look like these guys are shills for big pharma, right? And like the people that he's doing this to, like the guy that the lead guy from that developed the mumps vaccine, right? Like these are people who have, by and large, foregone much more profitable uses of their education and their genius to devote themselves to like keeping kids from getting fucking polio and shit. Man. And these are the people that he's demonizing and that he's like torturing with these ridiculous long depositions.
And one of the things that comes out of this, and we saw this during COVID, is that it doesn't take a lot of vaccine hesitancy to really throw the gyroscope off and knock it over. We saw this during COVID. There was a small murmur in the beginning of vaccine hesitancy that was hitting the internet. You were seeing, a couple of videos getting, maybe 1 million views here and there. But for the most part, there was sort of a bunch of people that were making sure that, no, look, we really are going to need a vaccine for this. If we ever want to have a normal life again, let's not like pull the plug on vaccines, and let's, try to make sure that we're doing the right thing here. And so there's a lot of people holding that back. But then you get to the summer and there's just, suddenly your president is starting to sound a little vaccine hesitant. There's other people that are in the administration that are sounding vaccine hesitant, while the people underneath him in Health and Human Services and, Dr. Fauci and things, they were always 100%, yeah, man, we need a vaccine for this. That's stupid to think otherwise. There's a bunch of other people, bunch of different pundits out there pushing like, oh, I don't know, maybe we don't need this. And man, they poison the shit out of that well, and look where we are now. And it's radiated off of the COVID vaccine. Now, all this vaccine denial stuff's been going on for years, but it really took off during COVID. And now I have a hard time wondering how we make our way back to even pre-COVID levels at this point.
Right, because like there's an obvious parallel here, right, where there's like an intellectual herd immunity that you get if the only people who are spreading this vaccine misinformation is this tiny, tiny shred that's way over here in the corner, and 99.3% of the people are vaccinated against vaccine misinformation, then you're okay, right? But it's, once you hit that critical mass, which could only be, it only has to be like 3 or 4%.
Yeah.
Right. It just has to be so that like everybody knows somebody who's hesitant to do it, because like, what vaccine denialism ultimately gives you is permission to do something you wanted to do anyway, which is not get stuck with a needle. Right. And it like that's why that it's so easy to sell people on this, because getting a vaccine or watching your kids go through a vaccine, it's so tough. When your kid is like really fucking young and you got to get them stabbed with the goddamn needle and they don't know why. Or when you take like especially the early COVID vaccines. They were rough, man. It was uncomfortable for like hours after, to a day after you took the shit. It was really uncomfortable. So people are being told what they want to hear anyway. It's real easy to convince people in that instance, right?
Yeah, and you bring up herd immunity, but one of the things they bring up in this article is that RFK and this lawyer and even Donald Trump are sort of all on the same page with, well, look, we don't want to ban vaccines. What we want to do is make sure they're not mandatory anymore. And you're like, dude, that's why vaccines actually work, is because we're able to say, if you want to go to school, you got to get stuck in the arm and you have to go to school and you have to have these vaccines, because if not, we're going to turn this into a measles funhouse, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to make sure that everybody is vaccinated. And that herd immunity, there's going to be some people out there that are immunocompromised and you can't give them this vaccine, but the rest of the kids are going to be able to protect those kids because they're herd immune. And what we have now is several people that are in the highest positions in our land saying, we want to make sure we don't mandate that. Well, then suddenly there's a bunch of flavor of the month parents who decide, well, I'm not going to do it for my kid. Mm-hmm. My kid seems pretty healthy. I'm not going to do it for my kid. And then suddenly we're going to have a bunch of schools that are going to be overrun with measles because it wasn't mandatory. And the doctors sure as shit aren't going to be trying to pressure you to do it, because to them, that's just going to be another fight they don't want on their calendar because they got to run to the next appointment.
We're kind of burying the lead a little bit on this story, because of course the big takeaway that most of the press has gotten from this is the fact that among the vaccines that this guy Aaron Sirius tried to cast doubt on, or even like try to get the FDA approval of revoked, is the polio vaccine.
Fucking polio, Noah!
Right, this guy is so evil that Mitch McConnell had to come out and be like, stop being so evil, man.
Mitch McConnell crawls up from his bubbling hole in the middle of the Senate so he could scream out in his black tar-filled hole, and then he scuttles back. Yeah, man. Mitch McConnell actually, isn't he a polio survivor?
Yeah, so this vaccine, because we think of polio vaccine, we think of like fucking Salk, but this vaccine is only like 50-something years old or something, 1977, so not even 50 years old. So yeah, he predates this vaccine and shit. He had polio. His leg was like temporarily paralyzed. And he's like, look, guys, I'm all for being evil, but not iron lung evil. Like, this is, the fuck are you talking about?
We were like on the verge of eradicating polio from the globe. Like, we were on the verge of making it so it wasn't a thing anymore. And then, a lot of different cogs hit the wrong space, and now we're in this place where people are saying, you know what, maybe polio needs a comeback. Maybe what we need is a comeback of this.
And scientists are saying that, hey, the fucking virus is still out there in the world, right? You're never more than a long flight away from fucking polio.
Yep.
But the thing that Syria is talking about, and the thing that RFK, because RFK Jr. and his people have now come out and tried to distance themselves from all of this shit, even though Aaron Siri is helping him pick people for the HHS right now. And Aaron Siri was the guy that he talked about as his fucking attorney general when he was running for president. And he's the guy that they're talking about as the lead counsel for the HHS. RFK Jr. is trying to pretend, I'm not, his fucking communications director for his goddamn presidential campaign was Del Bigtree, okay? And he's going to pretend like he isn't anti-vax now.
Right.
But what they're arguing is that the polio vaccine never underwent double-blind placebo testing, right? And that's the gold standard of medical studies, so they should take it off the market until they can do these double-blind placebo tests. But that would mean like you get a group of people and you're like, okay, so half of you don't get vaccinated against polio, and half of you do. And that's fucking unethical. You can't do that.
Unethical.
They've done, like it says in the article, they've done over 300 different tests on polio, right? On this polio vaccine to make sure that it's safe to give people. And we've got almost 50 years of data of giving it to, billions of fucking people over that time. So we have like a ton of data. There's nothing that we would learn from doing a double-blind placebo test that we don't already know. So, like, even if it wasn't terribly unethical, it would be unnecessary at the very least.
Yeah, and the Del Bigtree thing, this is a guy who has been anti-vax forever and who's been spreading misinformation about vaccines for forever. So like the idea, and I mean, he's one of the names, like when you hear the names, he's probably right up there with Robert F. Kennedy as one of those super spreaders of misinformation too.
Yeah, no, he's the guy who produced the movie Vaxxed.
Yeah, this is a guy who's he's so intertwined with this anti-vax stuff. And I know people are trying to separate themselves, but you got to separate yourself from RFK. And the president, the upcoming president does not sound like he's that convinced that vaccines are super cool. He's like, you'd have to show me something for the polio one. It'd have to be something big. And I'm thinking, no one should be able to tell you anything that changes your mind on that. You are too dumb. You thought we could do spray cleaner in people's bodies, man.